Are your viewers local in the New York area?
All over.
All over the country? Um,
Would that go to Skurnik?
that's probably the best thing.
Okay, so we'll do a link up to there.
Yeah, I'd say do a link up to the Skurnik website, because if I, what's going to happen is I can't think of all my retail customers off the top of my head.
Yep.
The first 5 that come to my mind I can tell you, but the ones that I forgot,
Right.
whose names I remember when I'm up in the elevator riding up to my room again, they're going to be like, what are we, chopped liver?
Yeah.
So in a way, it's better if I give no names rather than if I give some and not
Right.
others, because I've got red light fever with the camera on me.
You
Right?
got it. You got it.
Okay.
Anything you want to talk about in the book in particular?
My little labor of love.
How long did it take?
Well, it took 20 years to gestate, and it took about 3 months to write. That's
Was
the
it,
truth of the matter.
therapy?
Was it?
Therapeutic when you were?
Absolutely. Writing is always therapeutic for me. My agent says, Terry, there are good writers who aren't natural born writers, and there are natural born writers who aren't good writers. Thankfully, and this I took as a great compliment, she said, thankfully you're both. I'm one of those people who processes in writing. And so in many cases, until I am finished writing about an experience, I don't know the entirety of what that experience was, what happened to me literally, and what it meant. And so writing the book was really cool. I mean, I took some things that had been in my sales catalogs, things that I really wanted and wanted to kind of memorialize, and that constitutes maybe 20–25% of the book. And then there's a lot of linkage material, and then there were things that I had no idea were going to come out of my mouth until I was writing day after day. And
Until it hit the paper.
yeah, exactly. And a lot of times what happens when you're writing is you may go for 4 hours, and what you get to in hour number 5 is stuff that you didn't know you knew, and things that you had no idea were inside you. And the only way to get to them is to go through the first 4 hours, and then you finally get to the stuff that's really good. There's an improvising guitar player musician, whom I really like. His name is Mike Stern. The guy really swings. He's incredible. He's really good. But Mike, the best time that you see Mike Stern is when he's playing choruses and he's up like his 18th, 19th, or 20th chorus, because then all of a sudden he's run through his licks. He's played the stuff that he knows. And now it's pure improvisation and it's pure creativity. And you watch like the music play him. And the things that I really liked in the writing of this book were the equivalents. It's when I kind of got to places like, I'd read what I wrote the following day, and it was as if someone else had written it.
Wow.
I didn't know that that it was there in me.
Wow.
And so writing is a kind of excavation when it's good. And, I have a large vocabulary. I'm relatively glib. I can sit at the computer and churn out serviceable copy. But when it's good is when I get out of my own way, when what I like to think of as my verbal facility gets out of my way. And then you're playing music that you didn't know you knew. And it's actually, the music is playing you. So in that sense, yeah, the book was a lot of fun for me. I wanted to write a wine book that was different from any other wine book, because there are a lot of wine books on the market. There are academic wine books, and there are buyer's guides, and there are wine simplification books, and there was no need to add to those categories. And I really wanted to write something that was going to go back to first principles and suggest to the reader why wine was worth giving a shit about in the first place.
Right.
So in that sense, it's kind of my love letter to wine.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Speaking about music, your favorite band?
I don't really have a favorite band to speak of, because I've kind of, unfortunately, I kind of came up with rock and roll. I guess it happens to people our age. I kind of lost track in many respects. My favorite musician is a guitar player named Alan Holdsworth, and I'll listen to absolutely anything that Alan
What type
does.
of music?
It's kind of fusion jazz.
Okay.
It's not, it's not like, it's the word I'm thinking of. It's not Pat Metheny sort of jazz.
Yep.
It's jazz with rock roots, or it's rock with jazz roots. It's a hybrid being, classic hybrid being.
Cool. Sounds like something kind of correlated to the wine and the way you love it and cherish it.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. Once my kid moved out, he was bringing rock over all the time. He was kind of turning me on to his bands. Now that he's living on his own, I look at the ads in the paper and look at the names of the bands we're playing, and I feel like a real silverback. Like I'm scratching my head going, I haven't heard of any of these people. And I didn't want to be that person.
Right.
But now that I am that person, I don't know.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah, you can't deny it. Just got to be graceful.
As we start to wrap up, is there any thoughts as far as where the wine industry is going or should go? I guess that would be a very open-ended question.
It's a really good question. Unfortunately,
Do we have enough tape for the answer?
for the answer, you know, there's a dark horse in the answer to that question, because a lot of it has to do with what is going to be the development of people in their 20s who are just getting into wine.
Right.
Part of it, of course, was that in many cases, they didn't have access to the classics because they couldn't afford the classics. They tend to drink a lot more eclectically than we did at the same age. And I think that in many respects, I think that's a really good thing. But in other respects, I think it can create a kind of incoherence where you tend to scratch the surface of a lot of wine areas, but you don't really delve terribly deeply into any
You're just getting
one
ones
of
that
them.
are imported well and represented and so forth.
Yeah, so you have a lot of balls in the air, but you don't necessarily find yourself able to go deep. And you sort of see it reflected, particularly on wine lists, where people seem to be wanting to outdo one another as who can have wines on their lists from places that nobody's ever heard of. And on one hand, I think that's tremendously admirable. The more variety of interesting, quirky wines there are out there, I think the better it is for wine drinkers. But on the other hand, then you also have to wonder, having all these balls in the air, I think can also create, like I said, it creates a kind of sensual incoherence. And there are reasons why the classics are classics. And what I'm sometimes fear that I see is people reaching past very sweet, low-hanging fruit in order to grasp the kind of recherche novelties that are on the top of the tree, as a way of kind of outdoing the other guy. So that's a trend. I may be completely wrong about this. I hasten to add that this may be a value judgment on my part to which I'm not entitled. I may be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But what I'd like to see happen is ultimately people who are kind of playing the wine field find a category or two or three categories that they're really passionate about, and they decide that they're going to go deeper into those categories. But that's probably because I made a conscious decision at a certain point in my life that I was going to go narrower and deeper, as opposed to trying to know something about all wines.
A little about a lot.
Exactly, to know a little about a lot. I decided I wanted to know a lot about a little.
And I found that interesting, the book where you were talking about just how many different Pinots you tasted, and over and over and over and over and over again. I think that's tremendous.
Yeah.
What would you suggest to some of the people? Obviously, they're having their own cellars, whether it's a refrigerated system or it's something in their home or restaurant. How should they pick wines?
I think they should, first of all, I think they should truly pick wines that they spontaneously, sensually like, as opposed to buying what they think they should have as status symbols or badges of honor point systems, things like that. Buy wines that you're going to drink, as opposed to buying commodities and trophies that you want to show off. That's, I think, really important. I also think that you should tailor wine to the way you actually use it, and look at what you eat. Look at the.
That's a great statement, by the way.
Yeah, look at what you eat. Look at if you are somebody, for example, who eats a lot of white meat and fish and vegetables and doesn't eat a bunch of red meat. Maybe you're one of those kind of fledgling or quasi-vegetarians or what have you. If you're somebody who doesn't eat a lot of red meat, then why on earth would you want to compose a cellar that was 75% red wine?
Right.
So what I think you want to
Walk
do is
into the fish market, not to interrupt you, and there's 30 reds, there's 10 whites. Why?
Doesn't make sense.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. And the reason why is, I don't know, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why. None of them particularly lovely. So I would say that you should assemble and assort wines that reflect the way you actually use wines, how you drink them, who you drink them with, And most important, I think, what you eat.
Sure.
If you live in a cold climate, as I do, then you may want to structure your cellar somewhat differently, because there are also mood elements that come into play. On a really kind of, cold, sleety sort of day, you just may not be in the mood to drink a crisp white wine. On a sultry, humid day like this one, you may not be in the mood to drink Barolo or Barbaresco. So you should also look at where you live. And if you spend a lot of time on your deck and you're in a place where you have 5-6 months of summer, then please explain to me the logic of having a wine cellar that's even as much as 50% red wine.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense. All things being equal, if you have a cellar that you've put attention, time, and money into, then for God's sake, put wine in it that's going to reward aging.
Right.
That's a no-brainer.
And we'll also link back to some of the German wines that Terry was talking about before, where you can really get that, true aging worth process.
And remember too that there's an ineluctable difference between wines that keep and wines that age. Lots of wines keep. They taste as good at 10 years old as they did when they were first released, or maybe a little bit better. Or maybe some structural component of them has changed a little bit. Perhaps if they're red wines, they've become a little less tannic, or what have you. But wines that will really age, wines that develop a profundity of secondary characteristics, are few and far between. And again, whatever you paid for those wines when they were young, if they truly age, you are getting 2 or 3 times the quality that you initially paid for.
Right.
And I am, as you might have supposed, not somebody who believes in wine as an investment, as a monetary investment. I think it's a waste of wine. And honestly, I think it's a sin against pleasure. That doesn't mean that there's anything morally wrong with buying first growths upon release and aging them 5 years and then selling them at a profit. But I think, again, it's kind of it's a sad waste. If I were a vintner and I saw that my wine was being treated that way, I would probably, put a gun to my mouth and shoot my head out.
Finish the sentence. Wine is...
I'm quoting myself from the book, but I don't know that I can find a better way to say this on the spot. Wine is music in the form of water.
It's awesome. Great book. Loved it. I highly recommend it. Appreciate your time. We have one guest that wants to come out and ask a question.
No? You don't want to ask?
Why do you think it's important to have a wine cellar?
Why do I think it's important to have a wine cellar?
I'm a little biased, so.
Because it gives you the opportunity, first of all, it gives you the opportunity to kind of do an inner sounding. What kind of wine do I want more of? So then you're starting to really probe into your actual taste. Number one. Number two, I think it's useful to have a wine cellar because invariably what's going to happen if you buy bottles as you drink them is you're going to find something that you totally get knocked out by, right. But maybe you don't drink it until 3 weeks after you bought it or a month after you bought it, and then you go back to the store saying, I really love this wine, I want to get another 6 bottles of it, and it's gone, it's sold out.
Yep.
So you need to have a wine cellar, and also, honestly, it's a tremendous pleasure to be able to kind of vamp and improvise. My wife was a professional chef, restaurateur for 30 years, and you should see what happens in our household. It's like this crazy identity switch. She'll say, what are we drinking tonight? And I'll say, it depends on what you're cooking. And she'll say, well, I could go either way. Why don't you just tell me what kind of wine you want to drink, and I'll sort of design the food accordingly. And I'll go, no, that's not how it works. You tell me what we're going to eat, what you feel like cooking, what you feel like eating, and I will go into the cellar and select something for it. And that's one of the reasons to have a cellar. If all of a sudden your sweetheart says, I don't know, we're roasting a chicken and I'm putting slices of black truffle under the breast meat or something, not that ever happens to me, and I'll say, roast chicken, black truffle, well, then we can maybe have a little young Burgundy or something like that for it. So you go into the cellar and you pick around and you find the wine that you need, as opposed